Hey guys, today's book review is about Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. It is extremely good. I thoroughly recommend it. It's really smart, it's really thoughtful, it's really insightful. It gets you rethinking and re examining not just comics but all media, I think. And let me go through my notes. Right, so I first learned about this book, Understanding Comics, through Brett Victor, also known as Worry Dream. So Brett Victor used to be a human interface designer at Apple. He worked on the iPad, and the consensus is that he's a really smart guy with a really deep understanding of media technology, of interfaces, of visuals. And he has a bunch of really good blog posts about the future of technology and about how to represent ideas. He has several blog posts that are really good. Magic Ink, explorable explanations, and he has this idea called seeing spaces that talks about how in order to do experiments well, you need to be able to see, you need to be able to use the environment around you to see what you can do and what can be done and what the results of your experiments are and so on. And one of the books that he recommends is Understanding Comics. I think it's one of his highest recommended books. And the book has also been praised by people like Neil Gaiman and Matt Groening. And just, I can't remember when exactly I picked it up. I think it was on my list for a long time, and then I saw it at a bookshop and I bought it. And so my own Goodreads review was very clear, intelligent, thoughtful, and incredibly meta. A use of comics to explore the powerful art form of comics, the intersection of visuals and words, the meaning of symbols, how ideas are conveyed differently, how it all fits together. I highly recommend this to all artists, writers, filmmakers, etc. And yeah, I even just having this book around, like looking at it. So having read it, I look around and I feel like when I see the book on my shelves, I'm reminded that comics are incredibly complex, incredibly rich, full of nuance. It's a whole language unto itself. So let me just flip to a random page. This is there's this cyclical time concept and this idea of how panels represent instances in time, and just there's this really he talks about symbols and faces and how simpler representations of faces are easier to project your feelings onto. And I mean it really, I feel it really helps you see that visual language is a language. Nobody teaches you this explicitly. I mean, you don't learn it in like primary school or elementary school, but there is a whole language to symbols and visuals that we pretty much all understand almost universally when you watch cartoons or you read comics. And when you see multiple panels of images beside each other, there's a lot that's conveyed. There's like let me just read a couple of other Goodreads reviews that I picked out. So this is from Oriana. She says, honestly, one of the best things he does is to use the illustrations in the text in the best symbiotic way, enhancing and augmenting one another throughout. And yeah, so, even text, when it is represented, and there's a drawing that's represented, there's this whole spectrum of things in between, and you can kind of, bring the reader or the viewer from one part to the other. And there's just all this experimentation that you can do, and it's fascinating. Here's another one, also by Oriana. He talks a lot about how the reader is complicit in the telling of a comic story because so much happens between the panels. In the gutter, where the reader has to invent what is going on to connect one image to another. He uses an example of a panel of an axe-wielding man chasing another guy and shouting, "Now you're gonna die." And then the next panel is outside of the building with only a scream, i.e. And then the point is that to kill a character between panels is to condemn him to 1,000 deaths, because each reader will make his or her own decision about when and how the axe falls, how much blood comes out, how many strikes are needed, the specific choreography of the death. So, you don't need to show everything. Sometimes you show one thing and then you show something else, and the reader has to fill in the gap, which is, it's a profound thing if you know, you're involving them in the process, and now there's different people will read different things between the panels, and that's just wild to me, and it's something to think about. Another Goodreads reviewer, George, said his chapter on time and expressing time in space in comics truly blew my mind when I read it. It made me see and truly understand so much about pacing in comics. It helped me form what I like to call my internal gear shift. As a reader, I didn't focus on speed of my reading, and over time the only speed for reading became as fast as possible. But in comics, this can be a huge disadvantage, especially when going through slower and more solemn scenes. Now, when I see a comic page and take a look at the composition of the panels, I know when the story demands of me to go faster or slower, and I'm grateful for this newfound knowledge. Yeah, so one of the examples he uses is, you know, there's like maybe several short panels of a character walking, you know, opening a door, walking down the street, and then there's a big panel of the character in a bar, and there's like a lot going on in the bar, right? So there's a sense of with, on a flat piece of paper, right, different scales of panels, right, different sizes of panels implies to you how you're supposed to read them, and there's just this sense of space and time that can be conveyed visually, which is, again, just understanding that that's possible. I think it gets you to gets me at least to think about all the ways in which I convey ideas in space, right? So like if you're tweeting every day, like you know, if you don't tweet for a while, what does that imply? I mean, so okay, that might be reading a bit too much into it, but you know, space and white space and quiet and silence, like all of these things are also part of your repertoire as an artist. Ahmad Adib wrote, "This is a book on art and philosophy disguised as a book on comics disguised as a comic book." Yeah, I agree. Ryan says, "It's one of the best examples I've found of someone writing so specifically about a topic that the observations and implications become absolutely universal. He is so fixated and clear in talking about comics that the scope of his thought travels to all corners of creativity, art, and human endeavor. This is not only a testament to the validity of comics as an art form and McCloud's mastery of it, but also to the microscopic differences between the various supposedly discrete art and vocabularies thereof when viewed from the vantage of a close and sensitive read of any one of them in particular. A book that renews your faith in people's ability to communicate with and understand each other." I agree. It's just so, you know, he really deconstructs things. Let me try and find a page, right? So, you know, see this in this page, he kind of talks about how there are different levels of complexity you can use, and you may choose to use more or less complexity depending on what you want to convey, right? And look at this. Look at how he, you know, he conveys the idea visually by representing it like in the arrows, and then he modifies the character himself, the narrator's, you know, the writer's stand-in, and look at that. Let's just it's so refreshing. It's so it does things that you don't really expect, and it's really simple and kind of profound. Let me find something else. And yeah, it just gets you to think about all the possible symbols there are, all the possible ideas there are, all the ways you can frame things. There's things about like how you can use different, you know, speech bubbles, how you convey motion, what movement looks like. And again, when you're reading these things as a casual reader, normally you may not even think about how you understand what's being conveyed. But if you are in the business of trying to communicate and trying to explain things to people, you need these skills. And it's amazing to realize that people have been trying to do this for generations. Even, you know, he goes all the way back to like Egyptian hieroglyphs. And yeah, understanding, just seeing that there is so much rich history and heritage, right? This is our visual inheritance. That knowing that people have been doing this for so long and so well, and there's so much legacy to tap into, it's humbling and it's exciting, and it makes me want to be more artistic. I remember after I picked this up, I found myself doodling a lot more because I wanted to be a part of this world. So yeah, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. I highly recommend it. Done.